Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Thank you for being here. This powerful podcast offers inspiration, education, and guidance on healing from emotional and mental trauma, providing a safe space for survivors to share their experiences and promoting trauma-informed care with belief, support, and empathy. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. This is episode 120. This week, I don't have a guest. Rather, I'd like to expound somewhat on what I started talking about in episode 115, just a few weeks ago. It was an episode in which I brought out some of the more important aspects of how trauma impacts the brain and the body. This week, I want to concentrate on what it is to be trauma-informed on a practical level. And I want to go into a bit more detail from my last monologue and hopefully explain the phenomena of trauma in just a few different aspects, because trauma is really a complex thing. So let's get into it. As I discussed in the past, trauma is not just one-dimensional. It messes with you on so many levels, physically, emotionally, and even neurologically. If we're going to be truly trauma-informed, we need to understand what trauma actually does to people, and more importantly, how it affects the brain and the mind. So let's talk about that for a second. Here's the thing about trauma. It's basically your emotional response to something really distressing or upsetting. And sure, everyone experiences trauma differently, but let's be real. Some events, like sexual assault and rape, are just inherently traumatic. They wreck your sense of safety, make you feel like you've lost control, and they leave scars both mentally and physically. But, and this is super important, trauma isn't just about what happened. It's about how you react to it. It's your personal history and the support you have around you, your natural resilience. It all plays a role, and there's no cookie-cutter way to respond. Everyone handles it differently, and that's okay. A compelling and critical part of this understanding has to do with how the brain handles trauma. And there are three big players here: the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. Let me break it down a bit differently than I have in the past. The amygdala is this little almond-shaped part of your brain. It's like your emotional alarm system. When something bad happens, it flips out, putting your body on high alert. It's why you might feel jittery or on edge after something traumatic. Then there's the hippocampus. One of this guy's main roles is being in charge of memories. But during trauma, it can go haywire, which is why people often have fragmented or fuzzy memories of the event. It's not that they're lying or forgetting. It's just how the brain works under stress and trauma. Finally, there's the prefrontal cortex. This part is like the brain's control center. It handles decision-making, emotions, all that good stuff. But trauma can shut it down, making it hard to think straight or process what's happening. And when the brain thinks you're in danger, it fires up your stress response. Hello, cortisol and adrenaline. That's great if you're running from a bear, but what if it doesn't shut off? That's when things get super tricky. Chronic stress can really mess you up emotionally and physically. So here's the thing. When your brain's stress response doesn't get the memo to calm down, it's like having a fire alarm that won't stop blaring, even when there's no fire. That constant flood of cortisol and adrenaline doesn't just make you feel on edge. It can actually rewire how your brain works. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you think logically and stay calm, gets less active, which means your emotions can feel way harder to manage. At the same time, your amygdala, that emotional alarm system I just talked about, stays on high alert, ready to sound the panic button again at the slightest causal activator. It's exhausting. And on a physical level, that chronic stress can mess with your immune system, your sleep, and even your heart. Basically, your body and mind stay stuck in survival mode, which is no way to live. Here's another fascinating thing about trauma. As I mentioned, it messes with your memory. Survivors of sexual assault often remember certain details super vividly, but other parts, total blank. That's not dishonesty. It's just how trauma rewires your memory system. And honestly, understanding this can be a game changer when you're supporting someone who's been through it. It reminds you to be patient, empathic, and avoid jumping to conclusions. And now I'd like to talk about being trauma-informed. It's all about how you show up. Let's talk about what it means to actually be trauma-informed. It's not just a buzzword. It's a way of approaching survivors with empathy and respect. And I want to break it down to you in 6 core principles. Number 1, safety first. This one is immensely critical. Survivors need to feel safe, both physically and emotionally. Even small things like explaining what's going to happen next or promising confidentiality can make a world of difference. Number 2, trust is key. Survivors have already had their trust violated, so building it back is crucial. Be honest, be clear, and don't spring surprises on them. Number 3, peer support really helps. Connecting survivors with others who've been there, that's powerful. It shows them that they're not alone, and it can be incredibly validating. Number 4, work with them, not for them. Collaboration is everything. Let survivors take the lead on decisions about their care. It gives them back some of the control they might feel they've lost. Number 5, empowerment. Focus on their strengths. Even small choices like letting them decide when to take a break can make a huge difference. And number 6, cultural awareness. Everyone's story is shaped by their background. Understanding their cultural or societal context helps you show up in a way that's respectful and personalized. Now, let me wrap this up by saying that being trauma-informed isn't just about following steps or checking boxes. It's about showing up for survivors in a way that truly honors their humanity. It's about recognizing the incredible strength it takes for someone to share their story after experiencing the unthinkable and meeting them with compassion, respect, and dignity they deserve. Every interaction we have with survivors is an opportunity to remind them that they are not alone, that their voices matter, and that their journey towards healing is important. This work is not easy, but it is vital. Because when we stand with survivors, we're standing for justice, healing, and hope. We're helping bring justice to victims and survivors. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just aim to be trauma-informed. Aim to be a force for change. Take these principles and use them to make your corner of the world a little safer, a little kinder, and a lot more understanding. Whether you're working in the criminal justice system, healthcare, or just in your everyday interactions, your commitment to empathy and empowerment can make all the difference. Survivors need advocates, allies, and people who will believe them. They need us to listen, to learn, and to act. Together, we can create a world where survivors are not only heard but believed, and where justice feels not just possible, but inevitable. And here's one more reason to take this approach. Because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.